Today I'll be going over Chapter 16 of Alanna Nash's book, The Colonel. Chapter 16 is titled Black Leather Blues, the 68 Special. In 1965, Tom Parker secretly began negotiating with NBC executive Tom Sarnoff for Elvis to make a television movie. Parker also wanted worldwide theatrical release rights after its NBC debut, but negotiations dragged on and repeatedly stalled. Parker carefully guarded Elvis's television appearances to preserve their value. In 1959, however, he planned with teleprompter inventor Irving Kahn to reintroduce Elvis after the Army through a 100-city closed-circuit television concert. Parker promoted the closed-circuit concert as a historic first, but Hal Wallace and Joe Hazen feared failure could hurt attendance for Elvis's future films. Parker canceled the plan and responded with a sarcastic letter. "I know that both of you must be broken-hearted. If there is anything either of you could do to make me feel better, don't hesitate to go to any lengths to achieve this pleasant goal." After the canceled closed-circuit deal, Parker repeatedly protested when Elvis's films aired on television, claiming free broadcasts weakened demand for new movies and threatening to withhold future films. His deeper concern was protecting his negotiations with NBC, which, like RCA, was owned by General Electric. In October 1967, Parker and Tom Sarnoff resumed negotiations for Elvis's first television appearance since 1960. They ultimately agreed to $250,000 for a musical special and $850,000 plus 50% of profits for a feature film, Change of Habit, pairing Elvis with Mary Tyler Moore. Before the NBC projects, Elvis made Charo, a spaghetti western-style film that offered him a more serious acting role. Elvis said, "Charo was the first movie I ever made without singing a song. I play a gunfighter, and I just couldn't see a singing gunfighter." But he would eventually sing the title song. For the previous year, Parker had tried to find stronger non-musical roles to revive Elvis's interest, urging studios to abandon the repetitive bikini and nightclub formulas. The NBC music special offered Elvis's first full-length live performance since the 1961 USS Arizona benefit. It was taped in June 1968 and aired that December. TV Guide questioned whether television could restore Elvis's former excitement and appeal. Parker and NBC producer Bob Finkel believed it could, while Tom Sarnoff chose the Emmy-winning variety show producer partly because he thought Finkel could stand up to Parker. Parker quickly charmed Finkel, even making him an honorary snowman. Realizing that distracting Parker from the show would consume his attention and that Elvis needed a younger collaborator he could relate to, Finkel brought Binder Howe Productions onto the special. Steve Binder, at 21 years old, was a young but experienced producer-director with strong instincts for rock music. His credits included Hullabaloo, the influential 1964 TAMI show featuring James Brown and the Rolling Stones, and a controversial Petula Clark special in which she briefly touched Harry Belafonte, provoking racial backlash. Bones Howe, Binder's partner and the special's music supervisor, was an experienced sound expert producing records for The Fifth Dimension and The Association. He had also previously worked on Elvis's sessions at Radio Recorders as engineer Thorne Nogar's assistant. Howe remembered the pre-Hollywood Elvis as deeply involved in producing his own records, carefully shaping every instrumental detail and enthusiastically dancing to the finished playbacks. He also recalled Elvis as playful and charismatic, frequently flirting with girls and inviting local teenagers into the studio. Binder and Howe wanted to recreate the relaxed environment of Elvis's early recording sessions so audiences could see his genuine warmth, humor, and musical roots, not Parker's manufactured image. Binder agreed to participate only if the special captured Elvis as a unique, once-in-a-lifetime personality. Binder said, "I wanted Elvis to let the world in on that great big secret." Finkel felt the same way. In May 1968, Finkel proposed broadening the singer-sponsored special beyond Christmas material to cover Elvis's full career. Parker agreed if Elvis ended with a Christmas song and retained music publishing control. Elvis enthusiastically supported breaking away from his movie formula and showing audiences what he could truly do. On May 17, 1968, Parker summoned Binder and Howe to a 7 a.m. breakfast at MGM. He tested and intimidated them with his office fire drill, where his staff showed off how quickly they could pack up if Parker was unhappy with the studio. Parker also deliberately mispronounced Binder as Bindle and avoided discussing the special's content, offering only a stale Christmas radio program as guidance. Parker insisted that his outdated Christmas program represented what he wanted Elvis to do. Binder recognized Parker's power to intimidate those around him, but refused to commit until he could meet privately with Elvis. Binder believed Hollywood had made the 33-year-old Elvis outdated and stripped away his former intensity. The special needed to restore that original vitality, or Elvis risked returning to low-budget movies after his MGM contract ended. Meeting Elvis later that day, Binder was struck by his extraordinary presence, appearance, humor, and charisma. Still, he knew he had to speak honestly and determine whether Elvis could reconnect with the socially conscious culture of the 1960s. Binder and Elvis quickly connected, and Elvis admitted that earlier television appearances had left him feeling mocked and misrepresented. Binder reassured him, but bluntly said that despite his movie success, Elvis had become a musical relic with no #1 record in 6 years. Binder believed his role was to rebuild Elvis's confidence in his own talent rather than Parker's influence. He and Howe avoided directly criticizing Parker because they knew Elvis would immediately become defensive. Howe says, "Elvis probably felt the guy made a pact with the devil, that without the Colonel, he would never have gotten there." Binder acknowledged Parker's early value as a marketing genius, but believed he eventually prioritized manipulation and money over Elvis's talent. Rather than accepting $1 million to place Elvis in another formula film, Binder thought Elvis should spend that amount to work with a great director on the right movie. Binder remembers, "He laughed at that and said, 'You're right. He told me he had been burning up inside for years to communicate.'" Binder believed Elvis's fear could fuel a great performance, but the special remained a major gamble. It would reveal either a rejuvenated artist or a has-been. He questioned whether Elvis still had the musical instincts to recognize a bold contemporary song like Jimmy Webb's MacArthur Park. Elvis said, "Definitely." His immediate answer convinced Binder that Elvis was focused on the future. Binder saw the special as Elvis's moment of truth, requiring complete honesty. Elvis then left for Hawaii to get in shape and spend time with Priscilla and newborn Lisa Marie, while Binder developed a project they could believe in. Writers Chris Beard and Alan Bly shaped the special around the Bluebird, using Elvis's journey away from and back to his roots as its theme. His own music and Bill Bellew's black leather suit reinforced that return, even though the motorcycle jacket image was more associated with Marlon Brando than Elvis himself. On June 3rd, 1968, Elvis began 2 weeks of rehearsals looking tanned and 14 pounds lighter after a crash diet. Howe proposed replacing Elvis's usual Nashville musicians with top Los Angeles session players for a fresher sound. Elvis agreed to everything, but Binder wanted him to become more assertive and personally shape the special. Just 3 days into rehearsals, Robert Kennedy's shooting in Los Angeles devastated Elvis and sent him into an emotional spiral. Binder also discovered that Elvis was well read on conspiracy theories, possibly influenced by Parker's story about Sam Cooke. Binder remembers, "He told me all the books to read. He was convinced it was not Oswald who killed John Kennedy, and he was obsessed with the plot to assassinate RFK. Binder observed that Elvis was confident and humorous around others, but became fearful and submissive in Parker's presence. Despite this, Binder proposed ambitious elements for the special, including choreographed numbers, an arena-style concert, and a gospel sequence. Parker had hinted that Binder might direct Elvis's next movie, but he became less cooperative when Binder presented his ambitious ideas for the television special. Binder remembers, "I think what pissed him off more than anything about me is that I wasn't one of his lackeys." Binder continues, "Whenever Parker basically told me that I couldn't do what I was doing, the Colonel would look at Elvis and say, 'Right, Elvis?' And Elvis would say, 'Yes, Colonel.' And Parker would say, 'So, Steve, we aren't going to do that, are we?' And I'd say, 'If that's what Elvis wants, then we won't do it.' And then we would walk out of the office and Elvis would lighten up and jab me in the ribs and say, 'We are going to do it. To hell with Colonel Parker.' But he never did stand up to him in front of me." At NBC, Bob Finkel kept Parker entertained with liar's poker and practical jokes. After Parker gave him an autographed photo of himself in a Confederate uniform, Finkel jokingly responded with his own elaborate military portrait dressed in an Admiral Hornblower outfit and signed, "Commander Bob Finkel." Parker escalated the pranks by having fake Buckingham Palace guards block Finkel from his own office while he watched from around the corner. A week later, Finkel found his office door duct taped shut from the outside. Binder and Howe, who were also represented by William Morris, were disturbed by Parker's treatment of the young trainees and his desire to be treated like royalty. Finkel tolerated the behavior because keeping Parker occupied protected Binder from constant interference. And Finkel had become fond of Parker. He learned that Parker's immigration problems prevented him from traveling abroad, which was reflected in Elvis's contracts banning foreign filming. Parker also refused to let another promoter take Elvis overseas because he feared losing control of him. Finkel believed Parker was misunderstood and saw a caring side in his devotion to Marie. After her first hip replacement surgery, Parker visited her in Palm Springs on weekends and provided round-the-clock nursing care. Finkel remembers, "One day, I said, 'Tom, you've been pulling pranks on me all through this escapade. I'm going to do something to you, and I think it'll be the best trick. I'm going to trust you to decide because you are an honest man. But if you think I topped you, I want your cane.' And he said, 'You got it.' In mid-June, Billy Strange, Elvis's chosen musical director and co-writer of Memories, was fired after scheduling delays and a clash with Binder. Binder replaced him with Billy Goldenberg, a former accompanist for Barbra Streisand, who had also worked on Hullabaloo. Goldenberg gave Elvis a more sophisticated sound by expanding the music to a 39-piece orchestra. Parker was furious over Billy Strange's firing, especially because Strange had co-written A Little Less Conversation and threatened to cancel both Binder's job and the special, insisting Elvis would never accept the change. Tensions were high because Goldenberg doubted he could adapt his Broadway background to Elvis's music, while Elvis feared the large orchestra would ruin his sound. Binder promised to dismiss the musicians if Elvis disliked the result, convincing both men to take a chance. Binder remembers, "When Elvis heard the first note of the session at Western Recorders, he loved it. He had his sunglasses on and was standing next to Billy on the podium, and he looked into the control booth at me and gave me the high sign, like, 'We're going to be okay.' He just fell out, and he never once questioned anything that we did musically. That was the one moment when he knew it would all come together." Elvis effectively moved into the NBC studios, where dressing rooms were converted into sleeping quarters. Binder and Finkel enjoyed watching him relax and joke with Charlie Hodge, Joe Esposito, and Alan Fortas after rehearsals. Howe found the entourage's joking dull, but Finkel saw its humor and Binder saw an opportunity. Binder wanted to film Elvis's relaxed, playful behavior, almost like a documentary, giving audiences an intimate view previously seen only by his family and entourage. Parker said, "Absolutely not," but allowed Binder to recreate the atmosphere, leading to the special's famous improv segment with Charlie Hodge, Scotty Moore, DJ Fontana, and Alan Fortas. To ease Elvis's fear of running out of things to say, Binder and Alan Bly prepared discussion topics about his early career in modern music. Binder presented Elvis with the song "If I Can Dream" as a powerful closing statement about hope, youth, war, and social injustice. He believed the song reflected Elvis's sincere response to the assassinations of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr., and revealed a man who had risen above the prejudices of his Southern upbringing. Earl Brown wrote "If I Can Dream" overnight. Elvis initially thought Billy Goldenberg's performance sounded too Broadway, but Bones Howe encouraged him to give it a bluesier style. Elvis said, "Let me hear it again." Billy played it 7 or 8 times, and Elvis looked up. "Okay, I'll do it." Parker fiercely objected to ending the special with an original song. "Over my dead body will Elvis sing an original song at the end of the show? We had a deal for a Christmas song." Finkel argued that the show's concept had changed and that persuading Elvis to make a meaningful public statement was itself a major breakthrough. Parker finally allowed "If I Can Dream," but immediately secured its publishing rights, which Binder believed was his main concern. During recording, Freddie Beanstalk and Lamar Fike were assigned to protect Hill and Range's control and obtain publishing deals wherever possible. But Parker continued pushing for a Christmas song, partly to appeal to conservative viewers, support a possible holiday album, and honor his promise to Tom Sarnoff. Binder believed, however, that Parker mainly wanted a small victory after losing control over the special's direction. Binder remembers, "In my last meeting with the Colonel, Bob and I were asked to go up to Sarnoff's office. They said, 'The Colonel's telling us that we cannot air the show unless we have a Christmas song in it.'" Binder was quiet. All the suggested Christmas songs were stale, old-fashioned standards. Parker looked at him with an intense, angry glare. Binder says, "The Colonel just sat there staring at me, and instead of avoiding his eyes, I stared right back at him. I remember our eyes just locked on each other, and I said, 'Are you ordering me to put a Christmas song in the show, or are you asking me to put a Christmas song in the show?' In essence, it was ordering, and that's how Blue Christmas got added to the improv. His will was so strong that I think he felt in his heart of hearts he could will anybody into anything." On June 23, 1968, Elvis recorded "If I Can Dream" with extraordinary intensity. Binder and Howe viewed it as a near-spiritual rebirth, while the stunned orchestra watched Elvis perform with a hand microphone and dramatic knee drops. Elvis's later vocal was even more intense. Recording alone in the dark, he became so emotional that he ended up curled on the studio floor. After 4 takes, he listened to the playback 15 times, seemingly captivated by what Binder described as the sound of his own rebirth. Binder believed Parker disliked the special's direction, but recognized that Elvis was fully committed and that the project could be exceptional. As a practical businessman, Parker chose not to interfere while it was succeeding. He understood the special could sell albums and launch Elvis's next career phase. According to Lamar Fike, Parker envisioned it partly to demonstrate Elvis's live appeal, helping him secure a deal as the highest paid performer in Las Vegas. On June 25, 1968, Parker introduced Elvis's refreshed public image to 50 television editors at an NBC press conference, presenting him as a revitalized attraction ahead of the special. Although one reporter questioned whether Elvis's sideburns seemed outdated after the Beatles, his entrance and charisma quickly won over the room. Elvis joked that he was returning to television before he got too old, said he had become more selective about material, and credited small towns as the foundation of his audience. He remained outwardly pleasant, but privately showed irritation at the repetitive questions. "Oh wow, not that one again." Parker then treated him like a carnival attraction, inviting reporters to line up for photographs while stepping aside from the crowd. "Right over here, folks, get your picture taken with Elvis." On June 26, 1968, Parker's 59th birthday, the team surprised him with a parody of "It Hurts Me," mocking his feud with Bender. The lyrics included, "The whole town is talking. They're calling me a fool for listening to Bender's same old lies," and "Is it too much to ask for one lousy, tired Christmas song?" Elvis performed it while everyone laughed. The birthday parody was a major public defeat for Parker. Bender had loosened Parker's control and restored Elvis's confidence enough that Elvis could openly mock the man who had long directed his every move. Bender says, "I have no proof to back it up, but I thought the Colonel had the magic power. And I believed that before Elvis did anything, the Colonel would take him quietly into a room and use his amateur hypnotism talent on him. Elvis was very insecure, but 15 minutes later he would come out oozing confidence, convinced that he was the greatest performer who ever walked on the stage." Billy Goldenberg would come around to watch some of the taping and notice Parker usually sat alone in his small office and rarely interacted with Elvis except before performances. He never saw any warmth or affection between them. Goldenberg remembers, "Every time I walked by, the Colonel would say, 'Come on in, boy, and let's talk a little bit.' I'd been told he was the most terrible man in the world, but I liked him. I used to go right in and smile. I wouldn't say that underneath I knew how kind he was, because he never talked about himself, but it didn't seem real, any of it. He always reminded me of the characters that Sidney Greenstreet or Burl Ives or Orson Welles played. He was all those people put together. It was like he was playing a game of some sort, putting on the whole world." On June 27, 1968, just before Elvis's 2 live 1-hour performances, NBC discovered that only 25 audience members arrived. Parker had demanded control of all 328 tickets per show, promising to fill the audience with typical Elvis fans, but had failed to do so. Bender believed Parker had deliberately mishandled the tickets to sabotage the improv segment. NBC staff urgently recruited audience members through radio announcements and by approaching people at a nearby Bob's Big Boy restaurant. Before the 6 p.m. taping, Elvis panicked, trembling and sweating as he worried the audience might reject him. Bender urged him simply to walk on stage and try, even if all he could manage was to thank the audience and leave. In his first true performance in 7 years, Elvis overcame visible nerves and rediscovered the intensity of his early Sun record recordings. By the arena segment 2 days later, his confidence had surged and his black leather performance appeared raw, powerful, and almost feral. Although some production numbers now seem dated, the live performances remain among Elvis's finest work. His performance of If I Can Dream before the glowing red Elvis sign was the moment he artistically rescued himself. When Singer Presents Elvis aired on December 3, 1968, critics praised Elvis's return to authenticity. It became the season's #1 program, drew 42% of the television audience, gave NBC its biggest rating success of the year, and sent the soundtrack to number 8 on Billboard's album chart. Bender and Howe wanted a share of the soundtrack profits, but their contract included no album royalties because Parker had claimed no record would be released. When Howe raised the issue, Tom Diskin shut him down, and NBC accused the producers of risking the entire special. Parker publicly denied that a soundtrack album existed even after quietly securing NBC's tapes for RCA at no cost. The arrangement gave Elvis a free album funded by the television special, potentially worth millions in music rights, while Bender and Howe received credit only for the show, not the record. Finkel says, "That was the only argument I had with Colonel Parker. He didn't want any of the Elvis mystique to be eroded by a producer." Bender believed Parker had their names removed from later trade listings by pressuring RCA through its advertising power. Bender rejected Parker's $1,500 rights payment, bitterly recalling that Parker had called the project a $1 million experience despite Bender earning only $15,000. Bender felt the true reward was watching Elvis revive artistically. After enthusiastically viewing the original 90-minute cut, Elvis asked to watch it again privately with Bender. Bender remembers, "He watched it 3 more times and he said, 'Steve, I will never sing a song that I don't believe in, and I will never make a movie that I don't believe in. I want to do really great things from your new things.'" Bender challenged Elvis to act according to his own judgment rather than misplaced loyalty to Parker. Elvis earlier in the day had declined a simple social outing at Bill Bellew's apartment for pizza and beers, but after their conversation, he chose to attend Bill's gathering. When they got to the apartment, the gathering had already ended, leaving Elvis disappointed. Although he gave Bender his private number and Bender had called and left messages, Bender says, They were always intercepted. The walls came down immediately. The colonel wasn't about to let him get out into the real world. It was tragic. Parker saw Bender as a serious threat because he connected with Elvis creatively and could help him reclaim his independence and potential. Parker therefore moved to shut Bender out, protecting both his control over Elvis and the career on which his entire life depended. After taping, Finkel arranged for the giant red Elvis letters to flash on Parker's Palm Springs lawn as a final prank. Parker accepted the joke and sent Finkel his wrapped cane with a note that read, "To Commander Bob Finkel, from Colonel Tom Parker." Nash writes, quote, "The snowman was melting," end quote. That's it for Chapter 16. Stay tuned for Chapter 17, which is titled Las Vegas, Glitz, Greed, and Ruination. See you then.